I think when you are trying to get big things done and trying to push the envelope, you really want to push your people, but you also never want to lose like your basic humanity and who you are. At some point I just realized that, I'm not going to make everybody love me all of the time, and I have to stick to the things that really matter. Because if everybody who says boo, scares you, you're really not going to get far in this world, particularly in this town.
You've worked in government and in the financial service industry, both sectors that are male-dominated. Did you always have that sense of self?
My mother was a very well-known feminist lawyer, and my stepmother had been involved in city politics, city government. And I grew up in a household where these two women were sort of the power people in my life. And it must have been maybe towards the end of high school or even the beginning of college where suddenly it became clear to me that women didn't run the world. And so I think without even understanding how much it was part of my DNA, it obviously had a huge influence on my sense of being able to do anything. It almost felt like normal to be the chick in charge.
It takes a little bit of confidence to have that, especially when you're the only woman in the room and the like.
I think not only is it hard to be one of the only women in the room, and just that automatically is apparent, right? You walk in and you're the woman in the room. But then if you're the kind of woman who also doesn't try to be something other than who they are, it's sort of compounding the freshness of the interaction. I would hope that we live in a world where you can be who you are as long as what you're here to do, you're delivering, right? So even if you're a little quirky and you're talking about how you have to run out and get your roots done, they shouldn't care about that as long as the underlying work is getting done and that you're delivering. And that's just how I roll.
How have you learned to get consensus and, as you call, people into a tent? And what advice would you give to others in terms of doing that based on the work that you've done?
What I have found is if you are willing to listen, even if you really don't want to have this meeting, you don't want to have this conversation one more time, 90% of the battle is giving people an opportunity to talk out their issues and what it is about the proposed policy or the program or the product that's making them crazy. And so you have to be able to explain to people how there's a continuum and why you need to think more broadly than your immediate self-interest and think about what's good for the city and what's good for the collective. And that sort of back and forth, I think, has enabled me to get policies across the finish line that many people think we would never have been able to do.
What have you learned along the way to sort of take this thing that's called building a network and drilling it down into practical, action-oriented advice?
Wow, well, if I could totally answer that question, I'd be a billionaire, because then I would write the how-to book. I think I would say a couple things. One is never, ever, ever assume that the person who you're meeting is not worth spending time with, because one of the most amazing things that I have seen is people who I met 20 or 30 years ago, those people can actually wind up being incredibly useful people to you. And I think it's really important to never ditch people along the route. A lot of people, I think, are given advice that you need to constantly be sort of climbing the ladder of success and finding that incredibly powerful or more important person than you are and hitching your star to them. And I don't think that's such great advice. I think you have to be true to yourself.
You've been, really transparent and authentic about the unique aspects of being a woman in business. Describe sort of what motivated that and what can we learn from other women around that?
If you really do care about women having more power, having more influence, having more money, having the respect that we need to have, 300 years after, in theory, this whole movement started, you have to make personal choices every single day. And that often puts yourself at some risk. And I said to myself at Goldman, and I've said to myself here, I am going to consciously always try to do what I can do in every single way. And I've made that a hallmark of my leadership. And I encourage other women to do it, because if everybody did just a little bit of it, think how much better it would be. You don't have to be a radical feminist every single day, but be a radical feminist at least once a week.